Section 7 of Irish Wit and Humour. The author is anonymous. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by James Carson. Daniel O'Connell. Part 1. Darby Moran. O'Connell, in his celebrated speech in the defence of the Reverend T. Maguire, relates the following story, in which the reader will not fail to perceive the little chance which perjury had in escaping his detection. "Allow me," said he, addressing the court, "to tell you a story which is not the worse for being perfectly true. I was assessor of the sheriff at an election in the county of Clare. A freeholder came to vote under the name of Darby Moran, and as Darby Moran both his signature and mark were attached to the certificate of registry. He, of course, was objected to. It was insisted that he was illiterate. He could not have written his name. If literate, he should not have added his mark. In either view it was contended, with the vehemence suited to such occasions, that his registry was bad. It is, wherever I have authority to adjudicate, a rule with me to decide as few abstract propositions as I possibly can. I therefore resolved first to ascertain the fact whether Darby Moran could write or not. I accordingly gave him paper, and asked him could he write his name. He flippantly answered that he could, and in my presence instantly wrote down John O'Brien. He totally forgot that he was playing Darby Moran. Thus this trick was exposed and defeated. A dead man with life in him. It was difficult for O'Connell, even at an advanced period of his professional career, to exhibit those powers as an advocate which were afterwards so finely developed. For the silk gown that encased inferior merit gave a precedence to Protestant lawyers of even younger standing, and he rarely had an opportunity of addressing a jury. This probably induced him to cultivate with more ardor a talent for cross-examination, which was unquestionably unrivalled, and which was displayed by him at a very early period. It exhibited itself very strongly in a trial on the Munster circuit, in which the question was the validity of a will, by which property to some amount was devised, and which the plaintiffs alleged was forged. The subscribing witnesses swore that the deceased signed the will while life was in him. The evidence was going strong in favour of the will. At last O'Connell undertook to cross-examine one of the witnesses. He shrewdly observed that he was particular in swearing several times that life was in the testator when the will was signed, and that he saw his hand sign it. "By virtue of your oath, was he alive?" said Mr. O'Connell. "By virtue of my oath, life was in him," and this the witness repeated several times. "Now," continued O'Connell, with great solemnity, and assuming an air of inspiration, "I call on you, in presence of your Maker, before whom you must one day be judged for the evidence you give here today, I solemnly ask, and answer me at your peril. Was it not a live fly that was in the dead man's mouth when his hand was placed on the will?" The witness fell instantaneously on his knees, and acknowledged it was so, and that the fly was placed in the mouth of the deceased to enable the witnesses to swear that life was in him. The intuitive quickness with which O'Connell conjectured the cause of the fellow's always swearing that life was in him obtained for him the admiration of every one in court, and very materially assisted in securing his professional success. A young Judge Dunn. In the course of his attendance at the assizes in Cork, he was counsel in a case in which his client was capitally charged, and was so little likely to escape, and was actually so guilty of the crime, that his attorney considered the case utterly desperate. O'Connell entered the court aware of the hopelessness of his client's chances. He knew it was useless to attempt a defence in the ordinary way. There was evidence sufficient to ensure a conviction. At that time it happened that the present Chief Justice, then Sergeant Lefroy, presided, in the absence of one of the judges who had fallen ill. O'Connell understood the sort of man he had on the bench. He opened the defence by putting to the first witness a number of the most illegal questions. He of course knew they were illegal, and that objections would be raised. Sergeant Gould was the Crown prosecutor, and he started up and expressed his objections. The learned Chief Justice declared his concurrence, and decided peremptorily that he could not allow Mr. O'Connell to proceed with his line of examination. "Well, then, my lord," said O'Connell, after a little expostulation, "as you refuse permitting me to defend my client, I leave his fate in your hands." And he flung his brief from him, adding, as he turned away, "The blood of that man, my lord, will be on your head if he is condemned." O'Connell then left the court. In half an hour afterwards, as he was walking on the flagway outside, the attorney for the defence ran out to him without his hat. "Well," said O'Connell, "he is found guilty?" "No, sir," answered the solicitor, "he has been acquitted." O'Connell is said to have smiled meaningly on the occasion, as if he had anticipated the effect of the ruse, for it was a ruse he had recourse to, in order to save the unfortunate culprit's life. He knew that flinging the onus on a young and raw judge could be the only chance for his client. The judge did take up the case O'Connell had ostensibly, in a pet, abandoned. The witnesses were successively cross-examined by the judge himself. He conceived a prejudice in favor of the accused. He, perhaps, had a natural timidity of incurring the responsibility thrown on him by O'Connell. He charged the jury in the prisoner's favor, and the consequence was the unexpected acquittal of the prisoner. "I knew," said O'Connell afterwards, "the only chance was to throw the responsibility on the judge." O'Connell and a snarling attorney. O'Connell could be seen to greatest advantage in an Irish court of justice. There he displayed every quality of the lawyer and the advocate. He showed perfect mastery of his profession, and he exhibited his own great and innate qualities. Who that ever beheld him on the Munster circuit, when he was in the height of his fame, but must have admired his prodigious versatility of formidable powers? His pathos was often admirable, his humour flowed without effort or art. What jokes he uttered, what sarcasms! How well he worked his case, never throwing away a chance, never relaxing his untiring energies. How he disposed of a pugnacious attorney may be gathered from the following: For a round volley of abusive epithets nobody could surpass him. One of his droll comic sentences was often worth a speech of an hour in putting down an opponent, or in gaining supporters to his side. At Nisi Prius he turned his mingled client for abuse and drollery to great effect. He covered a witness with ridicule, or made a cause so ludicrous that the real grounds of complaint became invested with absurdity. One of the best things he ever said was in an assize town on the Munster circuit. The attorney of the side opposite to that on which O'Connell was retained was a gentleman remarkable for his combative qualities, delighted in being in a fight, and was foremost in many of the political scenes of excitement in his native town. His person was indicative of his disposition. His face was bold, menacing, and scornful in its expression. He had stamped on him the defiance and resolution of a pugilist. Upon either temple there stood erect a lock of hair which no brush could smooth down. These locks looked like horns, and added to the combative expression of his countenance. He was fiery in his nature, excessively spirited, and ejaculated rather than spoke to an audience. His speeches, consisting of a series of short, hissing, sputtering sentences, by no means devoid of talent of a certain kind. Add to all this that the gentleman was an Irish attorney and an Orangeman, and the reader may easily suppose that he was a character. Upon the occasion referred to, this gentleman gave repeated annoyance to O'Connell by interrupting him in the progress of the cause, by speaking to the witnesses, and by interfering in a manner altogether improper and unwarranted by legal custom. But it was no easy matter to make the combative attorney hold his peace. He too was an agitator in his own fashion. In vain did the counsel engaged with O'Connell in the cause sternly rebuke him. In vain did the judge admonish him to remain quiet. Up he would jump, interrupting the proceedings, hissing out his angry remarks and vociferations with vehemence. While O'Connell was in the act of pressing a most important question, he jumped up again, undismayed, solely for the purpose of interruption. O'Connell, losing all patience, suddenly turned round, and scowling at the disturber, shouted in a voice of thunder, "Sit down, you audacious, snarling, pugnacious ram-cat!" Scarcely had the words fallen from his lips when roars of laughter rang through the court. The judge himself laughed outright at the happy and humorous description of the combative attorney, who, pale with passion, gasped in inarticulate rage. The name of Ram-cat stuck to him through all his life. His encounter with Biddy Moriarty. One of the drollest scenes of vituperation that O'Connell ever figured in took place in the early part of his life. Not long after he was called to the bar, his character and peculiar talents received rapid recognition from all who were even casually acquainted with him. His talent for vituperative language was perceived, and by some he was, even in those days, considered matchless as a scold. There was, however, in that time in Dublin, a certain woman, Biddy Moriarty, who had a huckster's stall on one of the quays nearly opposite the Four Courts. She was a virago of the first order, very able with her fist, and still more formidable with her tongue. From one end of Dublin to the other she was notorious for her powers of abuse, and even in the provinces Mrs. Moriarty's language had passed into currency. The dictionary of Dublin slang had been considerably enlarged by her, and her voluble impudence had almost become proverbial. Some of O'Connell's friends, however, thought that he could beat her at the use of her own weapons. Of this, however, he had some doubts himself, when he had listened once or twice to some minor specimens of her Billingsgate. It was mooted once whether the young Kerry barrister could encounter her, and some one of the company, in O'Connell's presence, rather too freely ridiculed the idea of his being able to meet the famous Madame Moriarty. O'Connell never liked the idea of being put down, and he professed his readiness to encounter her, and even backed himself for the match. Bets were offered and taken. It was decided that the match should come off at once. The party adjourned to the huckster's stall, and there was the owner herself, superintending the sale of her small wares. A few loungers and ragged idlers were hanging round her stall, for Biddy was a character, and in her way was one of the sights of Dublin. O'Connell was very confident of success. He had laid an ingenious plan for overcoming her, and with all the anxiety of an ardent experimentalist, waited to put it into practice. He resolved to open the attack. At this time O'Connell's own party, and the loungers about the place, formed an audience quite sufficient to rouse Mrs. Moriarty, on public provocation, to a due exhibition of her powers. O'Connell commenced the attack. "What's the price of this walking stick, Mrs. What's your name?" "Moriarty, sir, is my name, and a good one it is. And what have you to say agin it?" "And 1 and 6 pence's the price of the stick." "Troth, it's cheap as dirt, so it is." 1 and 6 pence for a walking stick? Phew! Why, you know, you are no better than an impostor, to ask 18 pence for what cost you 2 pence. 2 pence your grandmother," replied Mrs. Biddy. "Do you mean to say that it's cheating the people I am? Impostor, indeed!" "Ay, impostor, and it's that I call you to your teeth," rejoined O'Connell. "Come, cut your stick, you cantankerous jackanapes." "Keep a civil tongue in your head, you old diagonal," cried O'Connell calmly. "Stop your jaw, you pug-nosed badger, or by this and that," cried Mrs. Moriarty, "I'll make you go quicker nor you came." "Don't be in a passion, my old radius, anger will only wrinkle your beauty. By the hokey, if you say another word of impudence, I'll tan your dirty hide, you beastly common scrub, and sorry I'd be to soil my fists upon your carcass." "Phew, boys, what a passion old Biddy is in! I protest, as I am a gentleman." "Gentleman! Gentleman! The likes of you a gentleman! Wish a begor that bangs baganger. Why, you potato-faced pippin sneezer, when did a Madagascar monkey like you pick enough of common Christian dacency to hide your Kerry brogue?" Easy now," cried O'Connell, with imperturbable good humour. "Don't choke yourself with fine language, you old whiskey drinking parallelogram." "What's that you call me, you murdherin' villain?" roared Mrs. Moriarty, stung to fury. "I call you," answered O'Connell, "a parallelogram, and a Dublin judge and jury will say that it's no libel to call you so." "Oh, terranones! Oh, holy Biddy, that an honest woman like me should be called a parry-bellygram to her face." "I'm none of your parry-bellygrams, you rascally gallows bird, you cowardly, sneaking, plate-licking bliggard." "Oh, not you, indeed," retorted O'Connell. "Why, I suppose you'll deny that you keep a hypotenuse in your house." "It's a lie for you, you dirty robber. I never had such a thing in my house, you swindling thief." "Why, sure, your neighbours all know very well that you keep not only a hypotenuse, but that you have 2 diameters locked up in your garret, and that you go out to walk with them every Sunday, you heartless old heptagon." "Oh, hear that, ye saints in glory! Oh, there's bad language from a fellow that wants to pass for a gintleman. May the devil fly away with you, you mischief from Munster, and make celery sauce from your rotten limbs, you mealy-mouthed tub of guts. Ah, you can't deny the charge, you miserable submultiple of a duplicate ratio. Go rinse your mouth in the Liffey, you nasty tickle-pitcher. After all the bad words you speak, it ought to be filthier than your face, you dirty chicken of Beelzebub. Rinse your own mouth, you wicked-minded old polygon. To the deuce I pitch you, you blustering intersection of a stinking superfluities. You saucy tinker's apprentice, if you don't cease your jaw, I'll—" But here she gasped for breath, unable to hawk up any more words, for the last volley of O'Connell had nearly knocked the wind out of her. "While I have a tongue I'll abuse you, you most inimitable periphery. Look at her, boys. There she stands, a convicted perpendicular in petticoats. There's contamination in her circumference, and she trembles with guilt down to the extremities of her corollaries. Ah, you're found out, you rectilineal antecedent and equiangular old hag. 'Tis with you the devil will fly away, you porter-swiping similitude of the bisection of a vortex." Overwhelmed with this torrent of language, Mrs. Moriarty was silenced. Catching up a saucepan, she was aiming at O'Connell's head, when he very prudently made a timely retreat. "You have won the wager, O'Connell, here's your bet," cried the gentleman who proposed the contest. O'Connell knew well the use of sound in the vituperation, and having to deal with an ignorant scold, determined to overcome her in volubility by using all the sesquipedalia verba which occur in Euclid. With these, and a few significant epithets, and a scoffing impudent demeanor, he had for once imposed silence on Biddy Moriarty. O'Connell and a bilking client. He used to lodge, when at Cork, at a stationer's of the name of O'Hara, in Patrick Street, one of the principal thoroughfares of the city. There, during the assizes, there was always a crowd before his door, lounging under his windows, anxious to get a peep at the counsellor. Whenever he made his appearance, there was always a hearty cheer. On one occasion, an old friend of his, who had once belonged to the bar, Mr. K. something, a member of a most respectable family, called on O'Connell during the assizes to pay him a friendly visit. He found O'Connell engaged with a shrewd-looking farmer, who was consulting him on a knotty case. Heartily glad to see his old friend, O'Connell sprang forward, saying, "My dear Mr. K. something, I'm delighted to see you." The farmer, seeing the visitor come in, cunningly took the opportunity of sneaking away. He had got what he wanted, the opinion, but O'Connell had not got what he wanted, the fee. O'Connell at once followed the farmer, who had got the start by a flight of stairs. The rustic quickened his pace when he found that the counsellor was in chase. O'Connell saw that he could not catch the runaway client, who was now on the flight leading into the hall. He leant over the banister and made a grasp at the farmer's collar, but instead of the collar he caught the rustic's wig, which came away in his hand. O'Connell gave a shout of laughter, and, quick as thought, jumped in high spirits back to his room. "Hurrah! See, K. something, I've got the rascal's wig." Up went the window. "Three cheers for the counsellor! Long life to your honour! Arrah! Isn't he the man of the people?" "Ah, boys," said O'Connell with glee, "look here, what I've got for you. Here's the wig of a rascal that has just bilked me of a fee." Shouts of laughter rent the air as the wig was pitched out, to undergo a rapid process of radical reform at the hands of the mob. As the wigless farmer made his appearance, he was received with groans of derision, and was glad enough to escape with unbroken bones. Sow West and the Whigs. The following humorous scene took place in the Court House, Green Street, Dublin. The city of Dublin was often contested by Mr. John B. West, a conservative barrister of no ordinary talents, whose early end caused much regret. That gentleman was very heavy and clumsy in appearance, and moved very awkwardly. Lord Plunket humorously called him Sow West, a name that adhered to him most tenaciously. O'Connell was opposed to West on 3 or 4 different occasions. It is remarkable that the opening scenes at the Dublin elections are conducted with far more decorum than similar scenes in other parts of Ireland. All the masses are not admitted indiscriminately to the court where the hustings are placed. The people are admitted by tickets, half of which are allotted to each rival party. It is the interest of both parties to keep order, and the candidates and their friends are therefore heard with tolerable fairness. On the first day of a Dublin election, the most eloquent members of either party come forward to uphold their favourite principles. On the occasion referred to, O'Connell, in addressing the people, referred to the appearance of Sow West, whom he humorously quizzed upon the beauty of his appearance. In reply, Mr. West said, "Ah, my friends, it's all very well for Mr. O'Connell to attack me upon my appearance, but I can tell you, If you saw Mr. O'Connell without his wig, he does not present a face which is much to boast of." To the surprise of the spectators, no less than of Mr. West himself, O'Connell walked across, pulled off his wig, stood close by West, and cried out, "There now, which of us is the better looking? My wig is off." This sally of practical humour was received with bursts of laughter and cheering. O'Connell looked admirably, exhibiting a skull which, for volume and development, was not to be surpassed. Election and railway dinners. O'Connell's enormous appetite often excited surprise. He ate a prodigious quantity, even for a man of such large frame. At one of the Irish elections, he was greatly annoyed at his candidate being unseated for a few months by the blundering decision of the assessor. On the day when the election terminated, O'Connell was engaged to dine with a Roman Catholic priest, who piqued himself not a little on the honor of entertaining the Liberator. The company assembled at the appointed hour, much dispirited at the adverse turn which the election had taken at the last moment. O'Connell himself was particularly angry, and chafed with ill temper at the blunder of the assessor, who would not even listen to his arguments. Dinner came on, and a turkey pout smoked before the hospitable clergyman. "Mr. O'Connell, what part of the fowl shall I help you to?" cried the reverend host, with an air of empressement. His ears were electrified by O'Connell's rejoinder, "Oh, hang it, cut it through the middle and give me half the bird." For an orator of a style so copious and diffuse, it was singular how admirably laconic he could become when he chose. During dinner, while occupied with the viands, he would express himself with the terseness and condescension of Tacitus. A railway company once gave a complimentary dinner at Kingston, and O'Connell, who had supported the bill in the House of Commons, was invited. The sea breeze on the Kingston pier sharpened his appetite. He had already partaken heartily of the second course, when one of the directors, seeing O'Connell's plate nearly empty, asked, "Pray, sir, what will you be helped to next?" Hastily glancing at the dishes, still untasted, O'Connell, with a full mouth, answered, "Mutton, well done, and much of it." Scene at Killiney. O'Connell was a capital actor, and his dramatic delivery of a common remark was often highly impressive. Many years since, he went down to Kingston, near Dublin, with a party to visit a Queen's ship of war, which was then riding in the bay. After having seen it, O'Connell proposed a walk to the top of Killiney Hill. Breaking from the rest of his party, he ascended to the highest point of the hill, in company with a young and real Irish patriot, whose character was brimful of national enthusiasm. The day was fine, and the view from the summit of the hill burst gloriously upon the sight. The beautiful bay of Dublin, like a vast sheet of crystal, was at their feet. The old city of Dublin stretched away to the west, and to the north was the old promontory of Howth, jutting forth into the sea. To the south were the Dublin and Wicklow mountains, enclosing the lovely vale of Shanganagh, rising picturesquely against the horizon. The scene was beautiful, with all the varieties of sunlight and shadow. O'Connell enjoyed it with nearly as much rapture as his youthful and ardent companion, who broke forth, "It is all Ireland. Oh, how beautiful! Thank God we see nothing English here. Everything we see is Irish." His rapture was interrupted by O'Connell gently laying his hand on his shoulder, and pointing to the ship of war at anchor, as he exclaimed, "A speck of the British power." The thought was electric. That speck, significantly pointed out by O'Connell, suggested the whole painful history of his fatherland to the memory of the ardent young Irishman. Section 7. Recording by James Carson.